Now then, if you want to jump into the light novels and read ahead since season 2 might not be announced for a good while.
Well, this is awkward. Don't worry, the pain will go away soon.
Most anime fans will be flexing how amazing or grand their beach episodes are, but with this release, we've gotten the wondrous privilege of having a fun beach movie. Oh, right. I forgot what kind of adaptation I was covering for a moment there. Now, let me start off this section by saying I was a big fan of Yuki's opening monologue that showcases her 40th game. Although it was kind of annoying because it sounded like someone was screaming in the background and it sort of broke my immersion. But it aided to overall set the tone of the movie and the core aspect that the anime itself implemented, that being Yuki's psychological deterioration. It's obvious Yuki's beginning to crumble under what can only be delegated to her goal, carry on Hakushi's will and clear 99 games. Yuki took on the challenge herself due to being Hakushi's protege, but it's obvious that the weight and pressure is causing her to lose her mind and in turn direction. But even so, the anime did completely change the game in order to fit Yuki's monologue. In the novels, this game was meant to be our key introduction into two massive characters for this arc, Maguma and Esse. We get to learn how the three were acquainted with each other through past games, along with this being Maguma's 41st game, aka being ahead of Yuki despite having initially been below her, and Esse continuously being ahead, with this being her 45th game. Now, in my eyes, this game only really adds weight due to it being our initial introduction to Esse and Maguma. Ergo, the game itself doesn't matter in the slightest. It was a survival game which the players practically dominated in and completed before even half of the designated time had even elapsed, giving our melancholic ultras 40 games under her belt. Now, another bit of quick context that I was disappointed in them writing out was the craftsman. Originally, when Yuki goes to get a checkup on her pinky ring and middle fingers, which were created by him after losing them in Golden Bath, he hides within a sack in order to jump scare her, which surprisingly works on our death game veteran. He's described as a dwarf-like old man from a fantasy story, with us also learning that the craftsman industry acts like a third party and doesn't belong to the organizers. But since organizers prefer their players to continue playing within these games, they see the trade as a beneficial relationship and continue to allow them. And as you saw in the anime, we get a reintroduction to Irie.
And I guess you've never met me before either.
I can't say I have. Would you mind telling us who you are, though?
A small teensy bitsy reminder for those who react to the same way as my anime only sister did, since she has changed quite a bit, well, more so her hair length, but Irie is one of the 3 survivors from Candlewoods, the only stump to make it out of that terrible game, and the girl who claimed she would never play again, and she probably meant at the time, but she hit the same roadblock that many players do. They can't seem to integrate themselves into modern society and do anything else but play within these games. And eventually she missed her chance to quit as she had already passed the wall of 30. Honestly, thinking about this kind of reminds me of how the 86 view the war. They spent so much time racing towards their deaths on the battlefield since a young age that by the time they were given the chance to integrate into what others saw as a peaceful society, they turned it down and chose to continue fighting as that was all they knew and felt the most comfortable doing. Their conversation closes with Irie's fear that the industry is beginning to get too big and that the time for another Candlewoods may be upon the horizon. When it comes to day 1, there actually isn't much cut content to really speak of, although there is a small issue that my sister pointed out to me. Now, since I read the novel, I have pictures at the beginning of it so I can put names to faces before even meeting them. But for anime onlys, when characters were doing introductions, they don't really show the characters who are speaking, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but I digress. Going from game number lowest to highest, we have Hizumi, who has never told us her game count. It is the protege of the masked killer Kiara. We have Mosuki, who's in her 10th game, and it shows through her jittery nature. Koyumi, who's in her 20th game, is a veteran player that not only was able to predict the Candlewoods didn't seem right, but also has a close relationship with Hakushi. Mitsuba, who's experiencing her own wall of 30 and is the protege to my GOAT. Airi, whose hair seems to grow even longer and is in her 33rd game. Magaba, who's probably the most jacked character we've seen so far, with this being her 43rd game, our Melancholic Ultras, who funnily enough has surpassed Magaba's game count, with this being her 44th game, see why one fine day comes in handy, and finally Esse, who has the highest game count out of the bunch, with 50 games under her belt, which Yuki clarifies makes her feel a bit inspired and frustrated that someone else is so close to her goal. And honestly, she's probably going to feel even more frustrated when she learns who that person actually is. We see them searching the island in the anime, and what we see is practically what we get to see in the novel as well, with them deducing that there'd be no way to swim and find land, and Yuki becoming a bit more frustrated in her inability to come up with different plans to see how far any possible land may be before Esse can. And honestly, I love the subtle foreshadowing with Esse claiming that searching along the side of the cliff would be suicide, considering that's where her hiding place was. And honestly, the massive plus about the anime alterations is how they handled Yuki's descent into madness. Between her telling Airi she seems to blank out when thinking too hard nowadays, and even visiting Esse's cottage, which wasn't in the novel, was an interesting and kind of scared me as I was worried if they stick the landing. But with these changes, it honestly just makes me want to see them animate Royal Palace even more, because if they're going this hard for an anime only breakdown, imagine how beautifully they can handle one of, if not her most influential game. The last bit of cut content within day 1 is Yuki barricading her door that night with a dresser just in case there is a killer on the loose. But hey, it's all just a tad bit of speculation, don't you think?
A body has been discovered!
Now, before I get into the cut content, there are two things that I want to say, both about the anime adaptation of Esse's body discovery and Esse as a whole. First, whether it's in dub or sub, Yuki's VAs absolutely kill it when it comes to these voiceovers, causing you to truly feel her underlying dread after seeing Esse's corpse mutilated like Hakushi's, which ties into one of the main instances within this movie, just how traumatized Yuki is from Candlewoods, which is showcased by how much Kiara lives within her mind rent-free. And 2, about Esse. This game single-handedly exhibits a proverb I created on my second watch of this movie. Something preservation treatment. Essentially, anytime something feels like, oh, it shouldn't make sense, just roll with it and call it Shiba Yugi magic. Hakushi survived after being mutilated, something preservation treatment. Yuki was able to get away without any repercussions despite her eye being cut by Kiara, something preservation treatment. Esse somehow cut off all her limbs and some of her organs, even broke some ribs, and was able to piece herself back together in the time span of one conversation and escape her cottage. Say it with me now. Something preservation treatment. The main draw of day 2 would easily be the protege of my beautiful goat, Mitsuba. Now, Mitsuba, both in the anime and novel, is characterized as a free and hollow spirit, hence why she was taken in by Mishiro and thrives within these games as a whole. And side note, but as per Mishiro's philosophy, since Mitsuba was capable of penning a game 44 Yuki, Mishiro in turn was able to pen a game 44 Yuki. Sorry, I don't make the rules, I just follow and enforce them. Anyways, moving back to Mitsuba, I believe that the anime did a good job with her until her overall confrontation with Yuki and her conclusion. Mitsuba blatantly says that she doesn't understand the hype behind Yuki and why Mishiro put her on such a pedestal, hell going on to say that Mishiro had simply deluded herself into thinking so highly of Yuki, which in very much is true as showcased through Golden Bath. But where I believe the anime tried to push too hard is what happens after Mitsuba stops drowning Yuki. In the novels, Mitsuba's characterization as a free spirit continues through her simply walking away with a farewell as if nothing had happened. But the anime takes it a step further, Now, within this iteration, Yuki was broken down to the point where she believes she blacked out and killed Issei out of jealousy, and Mispo, who saw Yuki pass by Issei's cottage, immediately suspects her as the killer, 2 plot points absent from the novel. Now, the reason I believe the anime begins to fail at Mitsuba's characterization here from an adaptation standpoint is because after drowning Yuki, she practically tells her to run it back later that night in hopes of her being what gives Mitsuba the spark she needs to feel alive. This alteration in her character really confuses me because in a sense, is she not doing exactly what she had criticized Mishra of doing? Now, contradictions can make a good character trait and I'm not overly mad at it, but it feels like such a heavy alteration of what Mispa's character is meant to represent. Mispa in the novel wants something to give her that spark, hence why she hoped to find it within her Wall of 30 experience and give it her all against Issei, and in turn, only failing because of her shock of Issei still being alive. Yet in the anime, she over-relies on Yuki to be the one to specifically give her that spark, and instead of flinching when she learns Issei's the killer, out of depression of realizing it isn't Yuki, she instead kills herself, which not only means Issei is forced to realize that she went her first night as a killer without a kill, but also paints Mitsuba as anything but a free spirit through her simply giving up at the fact that Yuki wasn't going to come after her. I don't adamantly despise how they handle Mitsuba's character, but just find these changes as something that makes her a whole different person compared to how she is in the novel. And the final thing I want to touch on is honestly what are my favorite parts of the movie as a whole. Yuki's inner monologues with Kiara, with Kiara attempting to push the notion that Yuki killed Issei out of jealousy and trying to convince her to go meet Mitsuba and accept her challenge. Her stabbing Yuki to showcase her becoming human and forcing her to realize she can never return to her time as a phantom drifting through life was something that made my skin crawl. I also find it funny how Moegi is just along for the ride, as from my remembrance she doesn't really speak. Thankfully, Yuki doesn't accept her challenge though and drifts asleep, which leads us into day 3.